Well, why don't we get started? Because there's some really cool questions in here, and I would, if you don't mind me hijacking it a bit, Katie, I'd love to hear from Gina first. I'd love to hear your writing process, Gina. I'd like to hear, how the story came about, how you brought the characters to life, and of course, my nosiness has to ask how much of it, if any, is based on any personal experience.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to see
Yeah.
you. It really is. It's so nice. I really appreciate this. I yeah, the interesting thing about this book is you know, it, I started writing at a time when, so the Wise Woman, as you know, is about these women who are going through great change in their lives, right? Like the rug has been pulled out from all of them. And they are all at this crisis point or this change point where they're facing a future that isn't the one that they actually imagined for themselves. And even though it might end up being brighter and better than the one that they had imagined for themselves, it isn't what they expected. So we find these women sort of at this change point, having to grapple with how that new future looks. How are they going to deal with that? How are they going to move forward? And who are they going to turn to in the process of that? And this it was an interesting time for me to be writing this book because at the time I was also facing a fairly uncertain future. My first book had come out and it had done really well, and I was very proud of it from a very small press. And I had this feeling of like, oh, finally, after years of writing, after years of trying to get published, here I was now on this journey of being a writer and being a published author. And then what happened was my next book, my agent didn't like. It wasn't for her. It wasn't right for her list. And the publisher was like, oh, well, then it's not right for us in our list. And the company that I'd been working at for 13 years went through a massive reorganization. And my role, as I knew it, was no longer going to exist. And then my family was going through crises, and my mom had to have open heart surgery. And we weren't sure how that was going to go. And
Oh
so,
my goodness.
yeah, so I didn't know what her future was going to look like or if she was going to be around. And I really felt like I just got into this place where I could just take an exhale be like, I'm here, and everything changed. So I had to pivot really quickly. I had to change really quickly. And I found myself, one of my reasons that I'm here at Pirate is, I started my own company. I went out to business on my own. I started doing communications and writing for other clients. And and then I also, with no agent and no publisher, I thought, I started finding myself thinking about maybe I was spending a lot of time reading books that were very hopeful and optimistic and that dealt a lot with women. And then I thought, I'm getting so much enjoyment from these books. Maybe I can not just read a book like this, but I can write a book like this. And things had felt sort of so dire that I found myself returning to a part of myself that I had probably long neglected because I'd made this big change into business and branding and storytelling and writing, serious literature, and that was comedy. I went to Second City, I did comedy there, and I did sketch comedy for many years. And I found that sort of humor that happens in dire times, that you rely on as a coping mechanism. I found myself drawing on that more in my life. And then those voices started coming to me in these characters, and I wanted to explore this idea of betrayal, not in the traditional sense of how we know it as an affair or something that's gone wrong in a relationship, but as in, what happens when the life that you set up for yourself doesn't turn out the way that you imagined it. All those steps that you've taken towards that in its own way is a sense of betrayal. You've invested all of this time and energy, and now you're not in the direction that you thought you should be, that you were told you were going to be. So that's where I started for Clementine. And her voice was really clear to me, that anger, and also that knowing that she can't stay in that anger for too long. She has to move forward because she's not a teenager, and she has a child and she has other responsibilities. And I'm a mom. And I think that that was something that just, I could connect to right away. And then Barb was a character I could connect to right away as well, because she takes on all the family responsibility and tries to make peace with everybody and carries all the extra weight. And, she tries to like do the right thing. And then Wendy, Wendy, the mom, is a meddler, but she has well-intentioned advice. And that's also something which, I know a lot about, and thought, like putting those three characters together, what kind of dynamics that creates, and also how that's, you have one parent who's seen very differently by their two children. And that's something which I really wanted to explore. So a lot of it was born out of my own circumstance at the beginning, that then sort of was the catalyst for it to explore. And then I really just kept extending it further and further for myself until it really ends up being fiction.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for
I've been
having
writing
me.
down some questions for you too, because I'm so interested. Like, I know we mentioned that book French Braid that we just read, where we felt like, for me at least, I felt like the family dynamic was so unrelatable. But like when I read this book, it was like it could have been written about my family. Like you said, I felt like I related to Clementine too, because like I have a son, and like you're just going through all those changes, and you can really relate to the like problems and the issues that are going on with them. And I think that like that's the like hardest part I feel like some authors have, is like relating to people and like getting that understanding and getting you to understand the characters, but also like um giving backstory and like feeling like they're heard and stuff like that. And I thought you did a really, really good job with this book. I was just curious, do you like, I like I said, I wrote down a few questions, but do you feel like this book has changed you from writing it? Like, do you feel
Oh,
like,
that's a great question. Yeah, I think the process of writing this book was way more enjoyable than the process of writing my first book. Even though I had so much more time for the first book, because nobody's waiting for it, right? There's no stakes. There's no, you don't have an agent. Nobody cares. Nobody wants your book. Nobody knows you exist. It's fine.
Mhm.
Take as long as you like. But then with the second one, the fact that the book that I wrote after it, that it didn't find a home, that my agent didn't like it, and that my publisher wasn't interested, that made me feel like I had to work faster because I don't want to blow all the goodwill from that first book. And as it was a 5-year gap. So in some ways, there was a pressure to write faster, which I learned. Still not a fast writer by any stretch, but there was also this freedom because you know nobody had bought this book, right, and nobody was expecting this book. So I could kind of write what I wanted. I wrote a book that I thought was in a similar audience as the other one, and it didn't take. So I might as well just write what made myself happy. So in
Mhm.
that way, it did feel different. And just being allowing myself to have more of a sense of humor also felt
Mhm.
different. And I think that was just a much more enjoyable process. I really liked spending time with these ladies. They made me laugh,
Mhm.
and that's something that I think I want to bring back into the process for the next book.
Awesome. Do you think it'll be a continuation or something completely
No, no,
different?
and I'm already no, no, and I'm already like in I guess a third or fourth draft of it. But no, it's still about women and relationships. Like it's interesting what you said about the book being relatable, because to me that's really important.
Yeah.
I know that it's just not what I write. I don't write giant big plot twists. There's no like, helicopter or like secret, document or bomb that's going to set off the world. Like I'm not writing thrillers or big, plot driven twists like that. For me, the most interesting has always been real life, regular people, and what are they going through? What are the issues that they're dealing with? And because it's fiction and we have that chance to play out the possibilities that might not otherwise exist in real life, I wanted to take the opportunity to do that on paper. So some people are like, oh, that's a lot of coincidences. Yeah, but wouldn't it be great if that worked out? And
Yeah.
sometimes in life there are those coincidences, and sometimes in fiction or in things that we watch on television or film, you get to artfully try to make those things happen in a way that works out for your characters. And my feeling is if you can't do that on the page, where can you do that? So it's a little bit of
Mm.
based on that reality of everyday circumstances of people, and then also a bit of wish fulfillment, right?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't it be great if? And so I'm trying to straddle that too, so it's not also just pure happy ending. Like they don't get back, she doesn't get back together with Steve, right?
Mhm.
Like that's does she find her way? Yes. Do they all find their way? Yes. But there's still things that are different. Maybe not enough for some readers. Some readers have said like, it was too happy of an ending, which I completely understand. But at the same time, I wanted the book to be uplifting and hopeful, and also for people to see that that version of happy could be different than what they expected.
Oh, I was going to ask, can you tell us if there were any parts in the story that after going through revisions and, speaking to your agent, speaking to your editors, that are quite different from the final product? Like, were
I
there
think
parts of the story that were
yes,
sorry, what were you
yeah, for sure. No, for sure. Because originally at the beginning there was it was mainly Clementine's story with her sister and mom. It's kind of side characters. And then after my agent read it, and then after my editor read it, we all agreed that those two characters were so pivotal that we wanted to raise their stories up. So it really is the three women together, and so that was definitely a big change. I think another thing that was changed was we really complicated Barb's situation, added more financial pressure to her, added more things that, put the screws to her a bit more to have that be a driving force for her. And then also for Samantha, Love became a character that was probably a bit more of a caricature at the beginning. And we really got to know her story more through the revision process and see that she was more of a human. There was things that drove her. There's a reason why she was the way she was. She wasn't just like a vapid influencer. She was a woman who had a dream and it hadn't worked out, and she was determined to find a way to leave her mark. And I think the book ended up being better for all of those things.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I like the balance too between sort of the old school advice and kind of mentality that Wendy had compared to like the Samantha Love and the like new type of content creators and stuff like that, like, and the way that their mind and their brain kind of works. I like that there was like the difference between those two. Did you find it hard to find the advice that was put in the book? Like,
no, I mean, I made it all up. So, that was really fun, was just reading the old advice columns.
yeah,
And the advice is terrible. Like,
I
it's
liked some of it.
some of it for sure, but some of the original advice like that I was drawing on, like they were just what they recommended women do was just shocking, and so I was like, what is just the most sort of outdated kind of some of it is really true, and then also, but what I tried to do is, as Wendy grew in the book, I tried to have the advice become more evolved, so that it felt like, it was a bit more specific to the actual women and what they were going through, and then their own advice that they would give themselves, right? Their own opinions on it. So I had a lot of fun playing with that.
Well, one of the questions that I have for the group later on is, out of all the advice in the book, I asked which one I thought that everyone liked the best. So it'll be interesting to hear what everyone else has to say about that. But I liked it. I liked having that kind of like things that make you think too. Like there's the stuff going on in the book, but then you get this advice about your own life and you kind of start thinking about yourself and like how it applies to the characters and the chapter that it's going to do, but also how it can also kind of apply to your life and stuff that was going on. So I liked that aspect of it.
I'm glad.
Leslie, did you want to ask a question? I have another one if you don't, but I wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I know, I'm sorry, I've been quite quiet for me, so but just first, hi Gina.
Hi.
I mentioned you to my dad and he's like, oh yeah, I remember Gina.
Yeah, no, Eric and I were doing that earlier, like, oh, connect the dots, jog the memory.
Connection.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Say hi back for me, please.
Thank you. Will. But yeah, I love the book. I don't have any specific questions. The only thing I was reflecting on with that last comment was just I really love the because I'm approaching 50. I really related to the different positions where the three different women were in their lives, and you kind of draw a line backwards. Well, I drew a line backwards throughout my life, and then of course that relationship with the mom, the matriarch, and versus outdated ways of thinking. So, which are also ingrained in us, and seemed to be in Clementine, that I could see that she was so hooked on that. So I really love that thread you drew between all.
Thank you.
And our own life arcs. So
Thank you.
The dovetailing. Yeah.
Go for it.
I was curious. about how you, like the research that you would have had to do. I assume, oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. You guys can still hear me,
Yeah, we can still hear
right?
you. Mhm.
Yeah.
Not sure what's going on here. Okay. To like, you really blended like urban planning with relationships, with social media. Like there was a lot of balls in the air to juggle. And I was, as insofar as my understanding of social media and LGBTQ communities, and well, I know nothing about urban planning, but it was just, I loved how like you were saying earlier about it wasn't necessarily a traditional happy ending, but for me, I felt like all the loose ends, all of those balls
Yeah.
up in the air that were being juggled, the plate spinning that was happening,
Yeah.
they all managed to land, and that's what worked for me for the book. How well each of the storylines landed.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that I really appreciate that because that is a challenge when I'm writing is I tend to have a lot of plate spinning. And, I'll sometimes think, oh, I don't have enough going on here. And then my editor will be like, there's a lot going on. Like, are you going to be able to like see this all through? But I sort of how my brain works. And I think it's also how a lot of us work. Like, you've got all these huge lives with these extensions, and then they kind of can get interconnected on the periphery. Um, and and for me, like so much of that was also about how things appear and how things are, and a big tell of that these days is social media. So I couldn't sort of speak to that without having somebody who works in that world, because Clementine's appearance of her marriage is one thing to her mom, Barb's appearance of success is one thing to her colleagues, Wendy's appearance of her definition of herself as a woman and success in this world is something else entirely. This, successful advice columnist and her daughters take none of her advice. I think that so playing on those levels of are things what they really seem and what is this front that we're putting up, where are these places? And I like taking those themes and sort of spreading it all throughout. And I think it kind of happens organically. Like I start realizing when I'm writing that I'm telling the same story in a whole bunch of different ways, like looking for a sense of home, looking for a sense of place, looking for a sense of identity, being concerned with appearances and how that goes forward, and everyone is doing it in their own way, you know, um, how do they belong, like are they acceptable in their area, like do they fit in their school, what is the what are the ways in which they're trying to pass as in whatever form is important for them to pass, successful, well, happy marriage, all those things, and then what is behind that, and so and in many ways, like because the book also talks so much about a place and a sense of belonging, and finding your place in the world, real estate and development was a natural fit because it's a home. And also development is about building that foundation, and all these women, the foundation was getting rocky for them. So that was something which, with Barb and the work that she's doing, I thought was a nice way to incorporate that thread.
How do you feel like the reception of this book compared to your first one has been, like, public wise?
You
Has it
know,
been going okay?
Yeah, look, I'm incredibly fortunate. Like I feel incredibly fortunate. So my first book was from a small press. They don't even exist anymore. They got eaten up by another actually small press, slightly larger. But they used to put out 12 books a year. It was an all-female press from California. And it was kind of remarkable that anybody even heard of Mothers and Other Strangers. I mean, there was one person sort of working full-time in the office. There was two people part-time. One of them was an intern. I hired my own publicist. I worked with them to like get the word out and to do everything. I mean, I literally went door to door with that book. I felt like I was selling them out of the back of my car. I mean, I was just like, if there was an event in like the middle of nowhere, I was there. It didn't mean I was like, I'll show up and sell it anywhere. I didn't actually have to sell the back of my car, but it was not too far off. And it got really great reviews and I got a really great reception. And the nice thing is it had a long life. Like it's still sold in some stores, it's still sold online, which is great 5 years out. So I got a couple of important notices that I think allowed me to then get a really great agent this time around and a really great publisher. This is my first time being published at a big house. So the difference has been in some ways huge, in some ways not at all. Like I thought, oh, it's going to be a lot less work on my part, and yet I still hired an independent publicist. I still was as involved. I still worked as hard. I still go into Indigo and go into the local bookstores with galleys, with a press sheet, with a free copy if their staff hasn't read, and talk about the book and try to get people to know it because there's so many books. How do we
Yeah.
sort of cut through the noise? And I think more and more we're relying on like celebrity book clubs. What was the Reese Witherspoon pick? What was the Heather's pick? What was that, to tell us what to read next. And books are expensive. And in Canada, a hardcover, as you know, thank you all very much for getting the book and for taking it from the library and wherever you got it. But, it's $36 or $33 to get a book. And
Yeah.
in the States, they're going to get a paperback or they're going to get the hardcover. It's going to be $24. I mean, that is a huge difference,
Yeah.
and I keep telling that to my publishers, like, that is a real barrier to entry for a lot of people. They're going to wait till the library has it. And so, thankfully, libraries have been a big purchaser of the book all across North America, which is really great. Libraries will never return your book, which is nice. A bookstore can get a whole bunch of copies. And then if they don't sell them, oh, that's my ringer. If they don't sell them, they return them, which is a
Mhm.
terrible thing to have happen. They send them back.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So
wow.
you see those huge stacks when a new release comes in. If they're
I
not all
didn't know
bad,
that.
they send them back. So, because they have to make room for the next book. But with this time around, I wasn't sure. HarperCollins was viewing it as my debut because it's my first at a big house, and it's a different. They call it a different shelf, a different audience than my other book. So we weren't really sure if it was going to get any attention. And I've been really, really fortunate. It had really great press. It's got a really great review in the New York Times. And then, it was on Good Morning America and People Magazine picked it. And the Jenna Bush book club was one of their most anticipated, and Parade Magazine. And I only mention all this because like it's freaking miracle. Do so many books that are coming out that it got that kind of notice, and the responses have been really, really nice. And I think that the nice thing that I'm finding, the thing that I'm most heartened by, is that it's got legs. So there's still people writing about it. There's still book clubs I'm seeing. I'm doing a couple events this fall, and it's not within those first 2 weeks of when a book comes out, which is when you hope to make the biggest impact, which is what really happens in publishing. It happens in those first 2 weeks. So that's been really different. So I just feel really fortunate that it's worked out that way for me. No, it's such a journey, like getting a book out in the world, right? Finding those readers and then tweaking that audience and getting specific with it. I mean, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think that's something we forget. We think a book's going to come out, everyone's going to know about it right away, everyone's going to read it, and then we want the author to write another book right away, and it's I think that so much of that is we're so spoiled with the amount of content that's readily available to us,
Yeah.
that we forget sometimes that the amount of things that go into getting that out into the world. From the time you sell your book to the time it comes out is 18 months. So, and then you're writing it for 2 to 3 years before that. So it's a long time with that one project to stay connected to and talk to, and then to find the audience. My book's been out for 6 months now. In another 8 months, another 6 months, the paperback will be out. And then it'll be a whole other life of it, So it's, I'm still sort of figuring out that rhythm because it's only my second one. But I think there's the only one that you can control, and that is the writing. And so that's sort of what I try to just get back to as much as I can.
Yeah, I was curious about that too, because I always assumed it would be a very difficult process to like write a book and then try and find somebody to publish it and do all that stuff. But like I've also heard of a lot of people, like, because you see on the internet now all these people that are like, you can write a book in like 30 seconds and then just like post it onto Amazon, and like, but you assume those don't get like a lot of like views reviews, or if they do, they're like not good quality. And so like a book like this, where it's like you can tell that a lot of effort was put into it, it is interesting to kind of see the behind the scenes of like
Yeah,
how.
and I think it's different from everybody. I think if you have a platform, like you're a chef, or you work in interior design and you've got a portfolio of things that you do, then you can go the self-publishing route, right? You
Mhm.
can do something like that.
Yes.
You get the book of poetry that you love and you have an audience for it, people will want to read it. Great. It all depends sort of what your market is. I'm writing in this split between commercial and literary fiction. That's to sort of make it worth everyone's while. There's thousands of people I have to reach. I don't know thousands of people. I'm not going to be able to do that. So I'm going to need a team behind me. And also, I want to do it at a level where like I can do it as my job.
Mhm.
So, I think that it all depends on what you're hoping to achieve with it.
Actually, it's interesting you talk about genre there. I'm going to segue into
Yeah.
that. Would you say that you deliberately chose a genre for your writing, or can you talk, maybe this is a two-pronged question actually,
Okay.
can you tell us what sort of writing has inspired you or influenced your own
Yeah. I mean,
writing?
I don't think I'm
Either genre or author.
sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think of myself as a genre writer as much as I think of myself as somebody who writes, yeah, that's the sweet spot between commercial and literary, and I think that for me that's a really well written book that's also a page turner, that people say to me, I read it in 2 days. I'm like, good. They get engaged with the story, they enjoy it, they want to go with it. That's that I don't mind that at all. But I do think that if it's but if I was writing like thriller or mystery, that would be a whole other different thing. I think I'm really inspired by books that are along those lines, like the literary and commercial sweet spot. I think of books like Barbara Kingsolver, that she's written, where they're engrossing and the characters are full and the story's fleshed out. And I want to spend time with them. And I mean, they are dense and they are thick and they're, full worlds. And that could be some genre in terms of, for a while, she was working in magical realism, and I loved that. That was really interesting to me. Sorry, I'm on someone else's computer and speaking. And and so that was really interesting to me. I also, I really enjoyed Caroline Levitt, my mentor. She writes literary fiction, but the characters are always so complicated and fully developed, and the worlds are so sweeping, and you kind of get lost in these characters' lives, and all the characters have these really strong moral choices. That's something which I'm really interested to as well. I also think there's something pretty amazing for a writer that can write smart, witty humor. Somebody like Kathleen Shine, or I enjoy Emma Straub's work, Meg Wolitzer's work. I've been really inspired by those authors. And then there's also people who like Tom Wolfe. Like I'll always think of this, like Tom Wolfe wrote A Man in Full, and it was such a strange book that I read at the time, with so many characters, so dense. And I'm talking contemporary fiction authors now, because that's sort of where my focus is. But there'll be just a line or two that sticks with you, just that sort of stays out, or going way back, like to Judy Blume, and of course, Margaret Atwood. I mean, there are so many phenomenal writers that we have, right? Like Lisa Moore, there's just these really talented writers who will sometimes work in a space that's quite different from my own. But I think that I've really been focusing a lot these past few years on reading really contemporary writers.
Do you think you would try and like write a different genre, like for like not maybe not this next one, but like go into like sci-fi? No.
It's recommended when someone's book maybe doesn't take off or gets stuck, and your agent will say, why don't you try your hand at X, Y, and Z? And I think, oh,
Oh.
I'm in trouble if that happens to me. No, but I have a writing colleague I know who that happened to, and literally like knocked it out of the park, was a bestseller with the next book.
Wow.
The option for film, like, it just hadn't discovered that. I can't read anything all that I can want to write about murder. I don't like, I don't want to spend time in that headspace, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying, so I said pushing the comedy more, that might be something I do. I'd be more inclined to play around with form.
Mhm.
I think that would be something that I would really like, or a different protagonist's age, something like that I would really enjoy. So yeah, I'm looking at that a little bit.
And do you kind of just like randomly get like the ideas for your books, or is it something that like you spend like a lot of time thinking about and like kind of like you have had it planned for a while, or like because
No,
sometimes
there's not nearly enough planning. I think that I normally it's a character's voice that comes to me.
Mhm.
So I'll get like their voice, or I'll get their dilemma, or I'll get like an opening image.
I wanted to ask where you got the characters from, whether they're all like facets of yourself or people you've known, or you just pull them out of the air and said, this
No,
sounds
I
like
think they are all facets of myself in many ways. I think thematically they were all things that I was grappling with more so than the people this time around. Like I think, I was really like, I mean, the idea of just I was talking about this earlier, like the sense of betrayal, like your life not going in the direction you thought it was going to be, and also I'm obsessed with real estate and, and cities and urban planning and how that all works. I have an immense amount of responsibility, like a lot of us do, juggling so many things. I understand that. I'm very close to my mom. She can be a meddler in the best sense of the word. But like, I understand what that's like. But also I was thinking so much about these everyday issues that plague, for lack of a better word, a lot of us. We devote a lot of our brain space to,
Mhm.
where is my kid okay? Where are they in school? What is their education going to be like? Where am I going to live? Like these things that are so seemingly mundane in terms of they're not giant plot twists, but we spend most of our time thinking about them, and so then is that not valid to explore, and to play with, and to create as a fertile ground for a jumping off point for a story. I think about how
Mhm.
most of us, like, we work to pay the bills.
Mhm.
Like we have responsibilities. They don't go away no matter what our situation. And so what happens when your whole world gets thrown upside down and you can't go pause and you have to keep moving forward? You want to go pause often, but you have to keep moving forward. It's not like those things go away, but now you've added something to your plate. And most women I know are like that. Like they just add something to their plate, add something to their plate, add something to their plate. And so that was something that I thought was worth exploring. And yeah, and I think in every character there's a little bit of me for sure. But like in all of them, in Parker, the assistant who works remotely, in Randall, who's in Rishi, who's doing, who's working in copywriting and having like I worked in a hotel, so I know what it's like to have a very wealthy clientele that you're not a part of, but you're a part of, to be sort of straddle that line, right? To understand what that's like. Like I think taking all those experiences and giving them to my characters and fleshing the characters out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was curious to know, Gina, given your theater and drama training background, when you write, do you write as though it could turn into like a mini series? Like I'm picturing, like Little Fires Everywhere, or those little Netflix
Oh
specials
yeah,
where
I do
there's like
love Celeste.
12 episodes.
Yeah, I do love Celeste Ng's work as well. I love her work.
Oh, I do. I should.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic. And Laura Zigman too.
Well, when you write, do you think like, yeah, for
No,
sure, for
I
sure.
don't. I don't think of it
I
in
was curious to know, yeah.
No, I don't think of it in terms of adaptation, but I do find that my dramatic training helps me with the characters. I'll often hear the voices, and then I put myself into the frame or mindset of the character, and a lot of the dialogue comes from that. A lot of the character development comes from that. And also knowing where to jump into the character's story without all of their backstory. I have it for myself, but then only choosing to highlight a section of it, for example. I do think also, having works a lot in film and TV is I try to picture. I try to picture what's happening time to time because I have a tendency otherwise in the initial drafts to leave stuff out, to just assume that it's there. So I then have to make sure that am I giving enough to the reader? So I think it works a bit in that way. Like if I can visualize it, have I told the reader that there's a corner store there, like, or am I just seeing it? So sometimes I want to make sure that I provide enough context for the worlds that I'm creating without sort of jumping too far ahead.
I think there was a good
Sorry,
amount of
Robin. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say, I think there was a good amount of that because there are some books where you're like, I don't need to know like what every flower on the bush beside the person like looks like to understand what's happening in the story. And like I think I remembered what I was gonna say. Like you were talking about how like these people were going through different things and like especially like the money thing. I think a lot of people can also relate to that because of everything going on with like COVID and like a lot of people have been feeling like that struggle
Pinch.
with money themselves.
Mm.
Sorry. And so I think like especially Clementine, like I think a lot of people feel that fear like of like things being too expensive and like not being able to like handle everything. Um I just thought of another question specifically for the book because I know we've been talking a lot about like the process and stuff like that. I had a question about the actual like book and what happens in it, but I just wanted to know like how did I guess what why did Clementine stay so calm after like everything that happened with Steve? Because like I saw that and I was like I would have wanted revenge. Like I would have tried to like hunt him down and like made his life terrible. But like she seemed so focused and she seemed to handle it so well. And so I was just wondering like how it was decided to like do that and not like go like scorched earth on him.
No, for sure. I think it's the fact that she has a ticking clock,
Hmm.
and she has a son, and she
Yeah.
doesn't have time to waste. She has to get Jonah in school. She has to find a place to live. He's finally feeling stable, and she can't disrupt that. And having been in a situation where, sometimes when things are so terrible, it's almost the opposite. Like you
Mhm.
just get really centered and focused, and everything becomes very small and specific, and it takes everything in you, and you got to drive forward, and you've got to meet your objectives, and you got to get through the day, and you got to check all these things off your list because you don't have extra energy to waste,
Mhm.
right? And people are counting on you. And I feel like that is where she was coming from.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like, I guess like she just had so much going on in her mind. It was just like even when they're in the restaurant and they're talking about it afterwards, I was like, girl, just slap him or something, like shake the sense out of him or something. Um,
That would have been fulfilling.
yeah, that would have been great, I guess, for me as a reader, but that doesn't really help her as a character, especially because they still need to move forward. So
Right.
I definitely get that. Did you also kind of have like I know you mentioned it before, but because you were in like movies and films, you kind of imagined the way that it would like look on camera. Did you have anyone like in mind sort of when you were like thinking about the characters too, like any celebrities you could almost see like being any of
No, that's so interesting. I get asked that quite a bit, but I really don't. And it's funny, like I think no, I don't, because for me I just see them as people. Like,
yeah,
they're just regular people to me.
it could
So
be anyone.
yeah, and I try to outline the characters with enough detail to make them clear in people's minds, but I also try to leave it open enough that who you see as Clementine might be different than who I see as Clementine physically, but that it's clear in your head. I personally, I don't enjoy it when someone tells me exactly what a character looks like.
Yeah.
I like sort of brushstrokes of it, and I want the essence of who they are as a person. But I'd hate it when like I think a character looks this way, and then like halfway through the book, someone describes them so vividly as looking else like completely different. I'm thrown off entirely.
Mhm.
As I'm reading this book right now, and in my mind, this woman is 40. It's a galley, so I can't say who it is, but like it's a really good book. But she's 40, right? All her problems feel like the problems of a 40-year-old. And then I get to the middle of the book and it was like, but the hard part about turning 30, and I'm like, what? Like, what's going on? When did this happen? Like, what? When did like I feel sort of like, I don't understand. And it got very specific also in terms of how she looked, and I'm like, what? That's not who I pictured at all.
Mhm.
So, I try to play with it, like keep it loose enough that you can feel it. Like you could be like, oh yeah, I know what that person looks like. But if you and I both held up photographs, they'd probably be different.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why like a lot of like books that get turned into movies always seem to not do that well, and I think it's because people get so invested in books and like they play out the scenes in their heads, and so when they see it in front of them and it's not the same, it's disappointing. So I think that's a fair answer. I was just curious
No,
if
I
you'd
know.
say like Cameron Diaz or something like that.
Was there someone that you saw as it?
No, because I think I was putting myself
That's
sort of
right.
like in
That's
those
exactly what I
positions
was
too,
doing. Yeah.
and my mom or something like
Yeah.
that, and my sister. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually like it best when they do put it into a screen play. I always like when they pick people that I don't know, that not the stars. I like
Yeah.
not the stars, because then it's so much easier to fall in and believe that that's the person. As long as they have the skill and they're a good actor, then
Yeah.
it's great not to remember them from something else. And oh, I already know them as this, and then you have to really buy, like, the story
Yeah.
has to be really good to buy into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is very true also.
I joined the conversation late. I'm sorry, but you just brought it up when you were talking about hard copies. You were talking about the business of publishing and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
was wondering, why is it normal to do hard copy and then a year later come out with the soft copy?
So hard copies get registered in the Library of Congress. And
Hmm.
also, hard copies are were to purchase primarily by libraries more than soft cover because they don't last
Okay.
as long. So so you sell a lot of book trade like to libraries, especially in the United States. So they want to go for the hardcover.
And they don't release them simultaneously though. So because I've
Some
always
places will.
I've so many times, like 99 times out of 100, want the book and I'm like, nope, I'm gonna have to wait for it to come out in soft cover, and then you have to wait a year
I
or
agree. Yeah,
two.
no, I know.
Yeah.
Some places are starting to do it at the same time. I think it's a great idea. My first book was a trade paperback, was that sort of really great, thicker paperback,
Hmm.
Mhm.
which was really nice. Um, but another smaller publishing company that I know is releasing them at the same time, so people have a choice. There's some people who like that hardcover and they keep it forever. It's just that it is that it lasts longer. But I don't know. I don't think it's the most efficient method. But I know that a lot of it has to do with libraries.
Okay, thank you.
That is
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Did you find, because this is kind of like current events wise, but did you
Yeah.
find it difficult for your book to be released in certain states in the states right now that are like trying to like ban a lot of books and
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah. I mean, I don't think my book will be singled out in any way as a banned
Mhm.
book. But if you were really looking to pick, you could, and that's what's so amazing. I think it's pretty terrifying. It is. It's terrifying to think that someone's book is going to get banned from a list because they have a relationship between two women, or
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, like, I would never even, I mean, I wrote Barb and I was like, oh, Barb has to have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
To me, like, I saw her so clearly. I knew who she was. I'm like, this is a woman. She's super powerful. She's great. She's all these things. She has all this responsibility. She's absolutely going to be the one with all the money in the relationship. She's going to have this like super fit, younger girlfriend who she tries to like set up. But I never thought for a second, like, oh, who's Barb's boyfriend or who's her husband? Like, it was just because she's a person to me. So I didn't set out to sort of tick any kind of boxes. But you're 100% right. It could absolutely prevent it from being in certain places. I think, fortunately, I have a great publisher, and they're like, write what you want to write.
Mhm.
So that makes a big difference, and they've got the muscle behind them to do that. Um, but no, I think the bigger challenge was that it was coming out during COVID. And so, it was going to come out originally in January and we were still in lockdown. And then people pushed it and I finally got the April slot, which was really great. but there were so many books that people had held back, publishers had held back because of COVID, that April the 5th was the busiest that anyone had seen that they remembered in their entire publishing history. I mean, every book came out like that. There were, on the day that my book came out, there were 30 that I, just from major houses, not even mid-level house, not even like smaller houses, not even small presses, not even micro presses. So, I mean, if there were 100 books that came out on that one day, I wouldn't be surprised. And then how do you make room for all of those? How do you even remember, make room in your brain for what came out that day? You know, so that was a real challenge. And it still is,
Yeah.
because you can do in-person events, right? So that's challenging.
I can't even imagine, like, especially even just like for like Truth and Reconciliation Day, like there's so many like books and stuff. Like, that's one thing about this book club, is we could have spent like a month like doing a book just for Pride Month, or doing a month like a book for, and I want to be able to do that, and I think I'm going to suggest stuff like that. But I think the whole point of like book clubs and like having people together is books kind of get you out of your own world, so that you can just empathize with somebody else and like hear about like different stories and different things that people are going to talk about. And then the great thing about a book club is you go and you talk about it with a group of people who may view it differently than you too, and like bring up things that'll like contribute. So
yeah, and I think as an author, you can only really be true to yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, there are definitely other authors who are writing about these same themes from a much different lens, you know, who are really diving into gentrification and how and urban planning and how it affects race, you know, how it's affected by race, how it really can divide communities, how it can really change the political landscape, and I completely understand that, and I explore that as well. Do I feel like it would be right for me to write that? Not from the lens in which I'm writing currently. I'm writing about 3 women in a family. I'm not going to sort of shoehorn something else in there, right? Am I glad that that book is out there? Yes. Like I read Sochil Gonzalez's Olga Dies Dreaming, terrific writer. And she's writing about gentrification from the lens of being a New Rican. She's Puerto Rican, New York, right? And she's also writing about what happened in Puerto Rico. And she's also doing it around the same time. A lot of the same themes: family, New York, cities, urban planning, responsibilities, the role of women, but in a different, a different lens. And so I feel like part of it is really being true to what you want to write, and also, and of course, stretching ourselves. But I think that there has to be more room for more voices, and I think that it's not my responsibility. It's not my place to try to go, oh, well, you need that, let me do that. No, like, why not hire somebody else? Why not add to the landscape? Why not bring in a diverse writer? Why not bring in a person of color? Why not have them write that landscape? Don't have me put all of that in my book. Like, maybe just add another author who actually can write about all of that, from a personal experience place. And then you just expand the roster of people. I don't think you want me to start changing. I don't think you want the current authors to then just start writing about more inclusivity. You want to create inclusivity by bringing in the people to the table with different stories.
Yeah.
So I think that becomes really important too.
Well, and I think like the thing is, like, this book is your story too. Like, that's the whole part about books, is like it's supposed to document like time and struggles that people are going through, and different like issues that like people can have. And that's just, I guess, why like it's so discouraging to see like places like not allowing people to just like create their own opinions after they read those types of books. And
for sure.
And that's why I honestly think it's amazing that you joined us and like are allowing us to ask you these questions and like talk about that stuff, because it's so good, I think, for people. And I think like it just shows like a really good side to you too, that you are willing to like hear our feedback and listen to our endless questions that we're asking.
And honestly, if you didn't like the book, I can't change it. So that's what I tell everybody.
But you're still here in front of us, and you're like braving it out.
I've had people say, I didn't like that character very much. And I'm like, there's nothing I can do about it now. That's not how it works. It's out in the world. No, but everyone's entitled to their own thing. You think about how many times you turn on the television and you see the 1 million listings of television shows and you think there's nothing for me to watch tonight. Like our tastes are so specific to us, right? Not everything is going to be for everyone. You know, as a reader, you have to find what's right for you and not be afraid. Like, don't be afraid to not finish the book, Erica. Just it's okay, you can put it down, you know. And as a writer, you have to write what's true to you, what you feel you can actually contribute to the conversation as, you know.
Yeah.
You know, so I think
Well, we
it's
really, really appreciate you coming. Thank
Yeah,
you so
yeah.
much,
Sorry
Gina.
for
It's
taking
like
up so much of your time. We
No,
really
it's
do
perfect.
appreciate
Do you
it.
have any other
that you
questions?
like gave us an
No,
hour out of your event. I really, really
Mhm.
appreciate you
No,
coming. It
it's
means
my
so much
pleasure.
to me.
It's my pleasure. Look, I'm so glad that you read the book. Thank you so much for taking the time to do so. I mean, everyone's time is really
Mhm.
precious. So I'm so glad that you could do that. And I hope that you enjoyed it. And I mean, this is a real treat for me to be able to talk about it. You know, we go and we work in our caves for a couple of years at a time and then find out that people are actually reading the book. It's a real thrill. It's really nice. And Erica, thank you for inviting me and for organizing it.
Oh, I'm so thrilled that you could come.
And to see you.
And I'm gonna be, I'll be
later.
messaging you.
Nice.
I know. What are the odds? So yeah, I'll be messaging you though, because I would love to hire you to come and speak at our writing group. I think
Oh my
people
gosh.
would get a lot out of listening to you speak as a writer.
Anytime.
Yeah, I'll message you. I'll send you a message.
Coffee. I like coffee. Just give me coffee and I'm good to go.
Oh.
Well, we'd love to hear from
You
you.
just need the Timmy's card. That's all she needs.
There you go. That's it.
That might be what it is. It's a stipend. It's like a
Perfect.
little envelope that we give
That
you
is
at the end of the
perfect.
presentation.
Delicious. That's a Timbit.
All right. Well, thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Have
Yeah,
a
thank you
great
very much.
Thank you. Be well, everyone, and we'll talk to you
evening.
again.
Thanks so
Feel
much,
free to email
Gina.
me
Take
any
it easy,
questions.
okay?
Okay, take care.
For sure.
Bye. Thank
For
you so
sure.
much.
Take it easy.
Bye.
All right, guys. That was awesome, Katie. Wow, you
Yeah.
like pulled it together.